The sun blazed over the desert of Midian, where Moses had lived for 40 years as a shepherd. He led his father-in-law's flock through the rocky, barren land, his days marked by routine and silence. Once he had been a prince in Egypt, but that life was gone, replaced by solitude and regret. Moses often remembered Egypt, the pyramids, the Nile, and the suffering of his people, the Israelites enslaved and crying out for help. He felt powerless, haunted by his past and his failed attempt to help. Now he wandered the wilderness, lost between two worlds, no longer a prince, not yet a prophet. He wondered if God saw the pain of his people, if there was any plan for them. One day, Moses led his flock to the base of Horeb, the mountain of God. The place felt different, still expectant. Moses paused, sensing something was about to change. He looked up at the mountain, unaware that this ordinary day would become extraordinary. The quiet of his life was about to be shattered by a call from heaven. The shepherd was about to meet his destiny. In the silence, his questions grew louder. Was there hope for his people? Was there hope for him? Moses stood at the edge of something unknown, waiting. The desert wind carried the echoes of his past and the promise of something new. He was simply Moses, a shepherd, until this moment. The world seemed to hold its breath. This was the day everything would change. The mountain loomed before him, silent and sacred. Moses was about to be called. As Moses searched for pasture, he saw a bush on fire. In the desert, fires were common, but this one was different. The flames blazed, yet the bush remained green and whole. Moses stared, puzzled. Fire that did not destroy. Drawn by curiosity, he stepped closer, leaving his flock behind. The heat was gentle, the air silent. Time seemed to stop around the burning bush. Moses, a man of the desert, knew this was no ordinary fire. It was a sign, a message meant for him. He felt a pull. He had to see, had to understand. Why did the bush not burn up? This was more than a natural event. It was something divine. Moses moved closer, compelled by wonder and awe. He sensed that this moment would change his life. The ordinary had become miraculous. He was about to hear a voice that would alter his destiny. The fire that did not burn was calling him in. As Moses approached, a voice called from the fire, "Moses! Moses!" He froze, fear and awe flooding him. "Here I am," he answered, trembling. The voice commanded, "Do not come closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy ground." Moses obeyed, feeling the sacredness of the moment. He hid his face, afraid to look at God. The voice continued, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Suddenly, the stories of his childhood became real. Moses realized he was in the presence of the Almighty. The God of his ancestors was speaking directly to him. Overwhelmed, Moses covered his face, feeling unworthy. He was a shepherd, an exile, standing on holy ground. The desert was transformed by the presence of God. Moses' past and future collided in this sacred encounter. The God who seemed distant was now near. Moses listened, heart pounding, as the divine voice spoke. He was no longer alone in the wilderness. The call was personal, powerful, and unmistakable. Moses stood barefoot, humbled before the infinite. The journey of a prophet was beginning. The voice from the fire spoke with compassion. "I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries." God had not forgotten the Israelites. Their suffering mattered. "I have come to rescue them and bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey," God declared. Moses listened, stunned by the promise of hope. Then came the command, "Now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt." Moses recoiled. Him return to Egypt? Face Pharaoh? He was a fugitive, a shepherd, not a leader. "Who am I to do this?" Moses asked, overwhelmed by doubt. He saw only his flaws and failures. The task seemed impossible, yet God was calling him to something greater. Moses stood at a crossroads, fearful, uncertain, but chosen. The mission was clear and the choice was his. God answered Moses' fear with a promise. "I will be with you." It wasn't about Moses' strength, but God's presence. Moses would not face Pharaoh alone. The Creator would be his guide and strength. This promise was meant to be his courage. When Moses felt weak, God would be enough. The mission was God's. Moses was the instrument. God asked only for trust, not perfection. Still, Moses hesitated. He needed reassurance. God gave him a sign. When you bring the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. It was a promise of future victory, a destination to aim for. Moses had to believe before he saw the outcome. The promise of God's presence gave him strength for the journey. The vision of worship on Horeb gave him hope. Slowly, fear gave way to purpose. Moses was no longer just a shepherd. He was a man with a divine promise. The task was daunting, but he was not alone. God's word was his assurance. The journey would be hard, but the outcome was certain. Moses' heart began to change. He was ready to take the first step. Moses still doubted, what if they don't believe me? He needed proof, something tangible. God asked, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," Moses replied. "Throw it on the ground," God commanded. Moses obeyed. The staff became a writhing snake. Startled, Moses jumped back. God said, "Take it by the tail." Trembling, Moses obeyed. The snake turned back into a staff. God showed Moses that ordinary things could become extraordinary in his hands. The staff was now a sign of God's power. Moses realized he would not go empty-handed. Miracles would confirm his calling. The staff was a symbol of God's authority. Moses' doubts began to fade. He saw that God could use even the simplest things for great purposes. The impossible seemed possible. Moses held the staff, feeling its new weight. It was no longer just a tool. It was a sign. God's power would go with him. The shepherd's staff had become the staff of a prophet. Moses was ready to lead. With the staff in hand, Moses felt changed. He had seen the burning bush, heard God's voice, and witnessed a miracle. Doubt lingered, but faith grew stronger. Faith is not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. Moses faced a choice: remain a shepherd or obey the call. He could stay in safety or step into the unknown. God did not call the qualified, he qualified the called. Moses chose obedience. He turned from the mountain, ready to gather his family and leave his quiet life. He walked toward danger and uncertainty, but not alone. God's promise and power went with him. The lesson of the burning bush is for all of us. We may feel small and inadequate, but God uses ordinary people for extraordinary things. He asks for trust and obedience. Moses walked forward in faith, ready to become a leader and liberator. The journey would be hard, but he was not alone. The promise of God was his strength. The staff was his sign. Moses answered the call, and history would never be the same, all because he stopped, listened, and believed.